One of the topics we cover in week 7 is solving systems by graphing. A system of equations is two or more equations, and you're going to try to find a point that satisfies the first one and also the second one. And I can do that by graphing. In order to graph these lines, I could do a t-table, meaning plugging values in for x and then finding the y value associated with them. Or I can put it in y equals mx plus b form and graph them by plotting the y-intercept and then using the slope. So in order to do that, I'm going to solve for y in both of these equations. If you look down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see I have the equation 8x minus 4y equals 12 written down. I want to solve for y, so I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides, and when I do that, I'll be left with negative 4y on the left-hand side and negative 8x plus 12 on the right-hand side. I then have a negative 4 as a coefficient of my y term, and I want to get rid of that, so I'm going to divide both sides of the equation by negative 4. That leaves me with just a y on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, when I divide negative 8 by negative 4, I'm left with 2, and when I divide 12 by negative 4, I'm left with negative 3. And so that gives me my first line written in y equals mx plus b form. Let's do that for the second equation, which is x plus 3y equals 19. I'll subtract x from both sides, leaving me with negative x plus 19 on the right-hand side. And then I see that my coefficient is 3, so I would divide both sides by 3. The 3y divided by 3 will leave me just y. Here I have negative x, and I can think of that coefficient as a negative 1. So I'm going to have negative 1/3 x, and then if I divide 19 by 3, I just have 19/3. So now I'm going to try to graph these lines. So I'm going to use the line tool. So I'm going to go to negative 3, that's that y-intercept, and then I'm going to go up to over 1. That's a little harder to do for this one. I can't graph 19/3 on a graph that only goes by ones, and so I'm going to have to pick some values of x for this one. Let's say I pick the value of x being 1. If I put 1 in for x right here, I'll get negative 1/3 plus 19/3. That will give me 18/3, or a y value of 6. And so a point on this line is 1, 6. And there's the point 1, 6. Now from that point, I can use the slope. The slope is negative 1/3, so I'm going to rise negative 1, which actually means I go down 1, and then I'm going to go to the right 3. Look at that, I hit my intersection point. I save it, and I check my answer. Looks good. Then I'm asked to say what the solution of the system is, and the solution of the system, let me make this bigger again, will be where the two lines cross, which it looks like the x value is 4 and the y value is 5. And I'm going to type that as an ordered pair, so I need parentheses, 4, 5. And I have found where those two intersect. If I want to do that on the graphing calculator, I can plug those in. I can put in the first one, 2x minus 3 in the first one. I tried to use my keyboard before. And then for the second one, I'm going to get negative 1/3, making sure I use the negative symbol, not the subtraction symbol. And I can do 1 divided by 3 in parentheses for negative 1/3 x. And then plus, I'm going to use parentheses again, 19/3, just to be careful. And then I'm going to graph those two lines. And I see that this looks like my graph over here. And in fact, if I hit trace, I can use my right arrow key to move along that one line until I get there, and I can see that's at 4, 5. I'm not quite on where they intersect, that's why it's a little bit off, but that lets me verify it with my other graph. The other thing I can do is hit Second, Calc, and go down to the 5th choice, which is the Intersect which is using what's called the intersect method. And it'll say first curve, and I'm going to move it a little bit so that it's on the y equals 2x minus 3. It'll say it up there in the left-hand corner, and I hit yep, that's the first curve. And the second curve, yep, that's the second curve. And my guess is about where my point is, so I moved my point to where I think it will intersect, and I hit enter, and it gives me the answer, 4, 5. So this is the intersection method on your calculator. This is graphing by hand. Both of them are very important to understand, and you have to be able to write your line in y equals mx plus b form in order to put it into the graphing calculator.